We know you hate surprises, and one of the biggest surprises coming up is the changes in the ASTM standard on how Phase 1 environmental site assessments are performed. Now, if you don't write environmental site assessments, you might be wondering, why is this relevant to me? And you're right, relatively speaking, you're accurate in asking that question. But you're probably a developer, a lender, a construction company, or even a broker. And what you should know is the changes to the Phase 1 ESA standard and how they're prepared will impact or could impact your property and the next transaction you might perform. Now, that might be a new transaction for a new project you're looking at, or it might be a refinance of an existing asset. But one of the biggest changes that's being made in the ASTM standard is basically the requirement for additional historical research on the adjacent sites. Dry cleaners have been the biggest sources of contamination historically. And as a result, the ASTM standard and the additional research requirements are really built to make sure that we as the environmental professionals are being very deliberate, not only about the subject site, which has been the primary focus, but now making sure that we spend just as much time on the adjacent sites as well. What that typically will mean that your consultant should be ordering aerial photographs, sandborne maps, city directories, just to cover the research needed on the adjacent sites. Now, that might equate to spending more time on the report, performing more of a thorough and much more thorough investigation on the adjacent sites, will unfortunately equate to potentially paying a higher fee for the Phase 1 environmental site assessment. And subsequently, based on data gaps that are now required to be identified in the Phase 1 ESA report in the findings section, they might have a higher ratio of recognized environmental conditions identified in the report. Now, we always recommend that having a conversation with the consultant and your go-to consultant is a critical part of this process, because they should be able to explain to you how their process is changing in preparing for this new standard to come aboard. And as a result, you should be comfortable and make sure that there aren't any circumstances in which you are blindsided by the result of a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. If you have any further questions, feel free to take a look at some of our videos, as well as some of our guides on the Phase 1 environmental site assessments. Now, one thing to remember, the changes for the Phase 1 environmental site assessment standard are technically not required to take place until the EPA approves the language, which is expected to happen in May of 2022. So hope that was useful, and thanks for stopping by.